Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys an update on two plants which have put on a huge amount of growth in the last couple of months, and that's my Bougainvillea plant and my elephant foot vine. So the last time I showed you the Bougainvillea, I was repotting it. It was quite a young plant. It just finished flowering, so it didn't have any new flowers on it. But since then it's put on lots of new growth. It's put its roots into the new compost at bigger pot size, and it's really benefited from that. And I want to show you this now because I'm going to have to drop the temperature soon in the conservatory, and this is going to go dormant and might even lose its leaves. So it's going to look at its best in the next week or so, and then it's just going to probably go dormant. So it's just starting to flower now, a second flush of flowers, and I'll give you some close-ups of them now so you can see them a bit better. So what it's done since the previous update is it's put on three main sections of growth. You've got the two lower sections down here, and it's just getting into the flowering phase now, so you can see right at the ends it's turning into flowers. What this plant tends to do is, if it's not growing flowers on its new growth, it grows thorns instead. So I'll give you a close-up of those. So this is an example of some of the thorns that it grows, and they are quite substantial thorns. You can see them there. They're also very sharp as well, so you do have to be careful with Bougainvillea, and a lot of Bougainvilleas do have quite nasty thorns. But as the growth continued, it then started to go into its flowering phase, and so you can see higher up here on the stem we've got some flowers just starting. And what it does is, instead of growing the thorns in between the stem and the leaf, it then grows out these flower brackets and then has about 3 flowers in each stem. So this top section of growth is the section that's grown the most. It's probably over 2 foot long now, but probably about 60-70 centimeters in height. So it has grown really well. It's also got several bracts starting to colour up nicely, but there's a lot more towards the top as well. These bracts towards the bottom are just about at full size. They should get a little bit larger. I think this one here is at full size. This top one here you can see just about full size, and the 2 side bracts have still got a lot of growth to put on. All the ones above that are still getting larger, and there's still plenty of growth towards the top and with lots of side bracts coming out. So this should be covered in flowers. If I had it warm enough for long enough, this would have a great display of flowers in about probably 2-3 weeks time. But as I say, as it going colder, this is probably going to be the most flowers it's going to have. As for the rest of the plant, you can see there's 2 other branches which have started flowering, but generally most of the growth seems to be going to that one strong stem. I'm quite happy with that because eventually I'm going to grow this as a kind of a climbing plant, so I'm going to grow it up the height of my conservatory, so I need to get to about 2 meters in height, and then I can grow it across the conservatory. So what I want is one strong stem, and then from that one strong stem I'll probably train off a few smaller stems. So what I'll probably do is, come springtime, I'll cut off all this growth at the bottom here. I'll just keep that one strong stem, have that growing upright, and then I can train it into a nice structure just to match the space I have here in the conservatory. So I'm really happy with how the Bougainvillea is done. As I say, really strong growth, lovely big glossy leaves now. I've been trying to keep it going. I've had some grow lamps on it as well as daylight, so it's had a combination of grow lamps and daylight, just to keep it growing as long as possible. As I say, with the cooler weather coming and the dark conditions, I'll just have to let it go dormant and wait till spring until we can get the next flush of flowers. So the other plant I'd like to show you is the elephant foot vine here. On the previous update it was only just starting to come out of dormancy, so there wasn't a lot of growth to show. But as you can see, it's really starting to grow well now and covering a lot of its support, so I'm expecting some pretty good growth from the tuber this year. It's just coming to the end of its growing phase, so I can tell that because the growth at the end is starting to get very small and weak. So you can see the leaves at the end are much smaller. Also, the leaves are formed almost to the end of the stem. What tends to happen when it's growing very fast is the first developed leaf is several centimeters further down than the main growing point. So this shows me that it's just starting to finish growing. Also, when I look at some of the original shoots from lower down, such as these 2 down here, the ends of the growth has actually completely stopped growing, and they've died as well. So you can see there's a lower section which is the dead bit of stem, and then above that is the leaves. That's often a sign that it's coming to the end of its growing phase. So to support its growing phase, what I did is I put up lots of string. Often when I've grown this in the past, I've not had much space for it, so it's become a tangled mess. The leaves have been kind of covering themselves, smothering out daylight from each other, so it's not been able to get to its full extent. Whereas this year I put up plenty of string. I was hoping that it might actually grow right over to here, and you can see the string goes up this far. Unfortunately, it's not going to grow that big this year, but maybe next year when I put up the strings again, it might get that size. So it's mostly focused its growth onto this area down here. You can see there is quite a good spread. I put up several strings. It started to branch a bit more than I expected. So instead of having one long stem, the one long stem did come up, but then at every node it had side branches, and even some of those side branches have started to have side branches, so it was quite a web structure. It wasn't as long and thin as it has grown in the past, so that's why I've had to put in all these extra support strings. And even on each support string there's already about 5 stems twining around it. So I could have put a lot more support strings in at a more dense concentration, so maybe I'll do that next time. But generally it's quite well spread out. There's a few areas where it's a bit congested, such as this area here, and also down the bottom down there. So I'd like to get a bit better spread out next time it grows. But it's much better than it has been in the past, so I'm expecting it to get a lot more solar energy this year, a lot more light coming into its leaves. Hopefully we'll get some really good growth from the tuber. And it's been flowering as well for the first time this year. So I'll give you guys a close-up now of the flowers. It's the first time this has ever flowered for me, this plant. So it must be just getting to that age now that it's mature enough to start producing flowers. So these are the flowers that have formed. These ones, looking online, these seem to be the male flowers. So I'm not expecting any seeds. They're not the most attractive flower because they're actually really, really small. They probably look quite large on the camera, but they're actually really, really tiny. So there's not much to see from a distance. You can see next to the size of the leaf, they are actually really small flowers. But they're quite pretty when you look up close. And they tend to start off white like these ones here, and then they fade to a darker yellow colour. They also have quite a nice scent as well. They're quite strongly fragrant. I haven't got enough flowers on here to really smell the scent from a distance, but if I go up close and smell them, they do have quite a nice scent. I'm not really sure what I can compare it to. Maybe a bit like a jasmine, but it's definitely not a jasmine smell. But it is quite a nice smell. And although the flowers aren't that exciting, it is nice to have something on the plant. It's now showing that the plant's getting bigger, getting more mature, and it's actually got the energy to start producing flowers. So because it's the first year it's flowered, I've only got a few. So there's a few coming up on this main stem. There's a few more starting to form here, but that's about it. All the other lower down stems don't have any sign of any flowers, and I don't think they're going to produce any flowers. There is a chance that they could put a flush out later in the year, but whenever this has grown for me in the past, it always grows lots and then it stops growing, and then it doesn't grow again until it completely goes dormant. So I'm not expecting any more flowers on this plant this season, but I reckon next year, because it's going to be a lot more mature and it's had more time to grow, I might have flowers covering the whole plant. As it's just the first year it's flowered, I'm quite happy to get this many. And it's quite interesting to see them for the first time. It's also, I now know which type of plant I've got, is the male or female. Looking online, this is the male type of plant. And unless they get a female plant, I'm not going to be able to collect any seeds from it, but it's nice enough just to have some flowers. And as for the actual tuber, we've not had any growth from that yet. It did swell up when I first started watering it, because it absorbed all the moisture from the compost. It's actually shrunk slightly since then, because all the energy from the plant has gone into the leaves. And it's been growing constantly since the last update. It's only just starting to stop its growth now. There is a tiny bit of growth still continuing, but as you can see, some of these tips are starting to die off now, so the growth is just about finished on this plant. So I wouldn't expect it to take much more energy from the tuber, and soon it's going to start putting energy back into the tuber as it absorbs the sunlight and starts to grow. So I'm not expecting a huge amount of growth in the tuber for the next few months. It's now November, daylight levels are really bad here in Scotland, and it's a bit of a big area to cover with a grow light. Also, it's quite a difficult plant to effectively cover with a grow light because it's quite spaced out. I'd have to cover the whole area with the grow light, so a lot of that light would be wasted out the window or elsewhere. So I'm not going to put this under a grow lamp. I'm just going to let it have natural daylight, see how it does. It's very dark here in winter though in Scotland, so the growth will be quite slow. And it won't be putting any rapid growth on until February, March time, when the daylight starts to get better again as the spring starts to arrive. So I reckon this will just kind of sit here, not doing much. Come spring, it'll probably put on some rapid growth into the tuber, and then it will probably go dormant sometime in April, May, when the temperatures warm up and it gets hot again in the conservatory. So at the moment, it's been kept around 19 degrees in the day, 16 degrees at night. But because it's getting colder outside and I'm not getting much thermal energy from the solar panels and from the light coming into the conservatory and heating it up from the sun, I'm going to have to drop the temperature soon. So it's probably going to be around about 10 degrees at night and maybe 12, 16 degrees during the day. I'm not sure yet. It just depends how cold the winter is and how much I'm willing to spend on gas bills. But I'm hoping to keep this above 10 degrees for most of the time. I don't want it to get too cold. It is a winter growing plant, so in the wild it would grow in the winter, so the cooler temperatures it's quite happy with, but I don't want it to get so cold that it completely stops growth and goes dormant again. So I'll see how it does. I've never grown it in such a cold environment. I've normally had it in a flat where it's about 16 degrees in winter, whereas this one, as I say, will be more like 10 to 16 degrees. And if it's a very hard frost outside and my heating system can't cope with it, this might get closer to 5 degrees during some of the coldest nights. So we'll see how it does. I'll give you guys an update later in the year. As I say, I don't know how it's going to survive through the winter, if it's going to get thrips or aphids or what. But that's about it for this update. So the Bougainvillea, come springtime, it might be looking a bit rough. It might have lost a lot of leaves because it'll have gone dormant, but it should be putting on some good strong new growth and starting to come into the summer season. This elephant foot vine, hopefully we're going to get some more growth from the tuber. Tuber at the moment, as I say, hasn't grown because it's been putting all the energy into the leaves. And the leaves will probably be looking a lot tattier on this, and they might be starting to go into dormancy. So the top half, there won't be any more growth, but there should hopefully be a lot more growth in the tuber. So that's all for this update, and I'll see you guys hopefully sometime in spring.